Commander Zixith stood on the bridge of his warship, watching the small cargo vessel drift through space. His four eyes focused on the scanner readings. The ship was running dark, trying to hide from detection. This was exactly the kind of behavior that made his job necessary. "Sir, we have them locked in our tractor beam," reported his second officer, Kralvex. The younger Krillian's scales were bright blue with excitement. It had been weeks since they caught any smugglers. Zixith nodded. His own scales were the deep purple of age and experience. He had been hunting criminals across the galaxy for over 30 years. "Prepare the boarding party. Standard search and seizure protocols." The cargo ship was old and beaten up. Its hull showed signs of many repairs. These smugglers were either very poor or very careful with their money. Zixith suspected both. As his team cut through the airlock, he could smell something strange. The air inside the ship was thick and unpleasant. "Commander, you need to see this," called out Sergeant Tholak from deeper in the ship. His voice carried an odd tone that made Zixith hurry forward. The cargo hold was larger than expected, but what Zixith saw there made him stop breathing for a moment. Rows of metal cages filled the space. Inside each cage were small creatures he had never seen before. They had pale skin and strange fur on the tops of their heads. Their eyes were round and wet, looking at him with fear. "What are these things?" whispered Kralvex, stepping up beside his commander. One of the creatures, smaller than the others, reached through the bars toward Zixith. It made soft sounds that seemed like some kind of language. The commander felt something twist in his chest. In all his years of war and conquest, he had never felt this strange pulling sensation. "Check the manifest," Zixith ordered, his voice rougher than usual. Tholak consulted his scanner. "Listed as biological specimens for research. No species designation. The paperwork shows they were picked up from a facility in the Outer Rim." Zixith counted the cages, 37 creatures in total. They were different sizes, some very small, others nearly adult-sized. The small one that had reached for him was making those soft sounds again. Other creatures in nearby cages were responding to it. "Sir, I found the smugglers," reported another soldier from the front of the ship. 3 Velthari traders sat in the cockpit, their tentacles bound with restraints. The Velthari were known throughout the galaxy for their willingness to transport anything for the right price. They had no honor, but they were usually honest about their cargo. "What are these creatures?" Zixith demanded, pointing toward the cargo hold. The lead Velthari, his skin a sickly green color, looked annoyed. "Just some specimens. We were hired to transport them to the research station at Colmar 7. Nothing illegal about moving cargo." "These are living beings," Zixith said. "They show signs of intelligence." "Barely," the Velthari replied with a dismissive wave of his tentacles. "They are humans, new species from the outer regions, simple creatures, good for basic research purposes." Zixith had heard of humans. The Galactic Council had made contact with them only recently. They were supposed to be a young species barely able to travel between stars. But looking at these creatures in their cages, he felt that twist in his chest again. "Why are they in cages?" he asked. "For transport safety," the Velthari said quickly. "And they were like this when we picked them up. The facility said they were difficult to control." Zixith walked back to the cargo hold. The small creature was still reaching through the bars. When he came close, it spoke in its strange language. The sounds were soft and musical, nothing like the harsh tones of most galactic languages. "Do you understand what it is saying?" he asked his translator device. The device beeped and displayed text. "Basic human language detected. Translation: Please help us, we want to go home." The words hit Zixith like a physical blow. These creatures could talk, they could ask for help. They wanted to go home. He looked around the cargo hold again, seeing it with new eyes. This was not a research transport, this was a prison ship. "Run a deeper scan on these humans," he ordered Tholak. "I want to know their condition." The results came back within minutes. "Sir, they show signs of malnutrition. Some have injuries that appear to be from restraints. The younger ones are severely dehydrated." Zixith felt anger building in his chest. His species were warriors. They conquered worlds and defeated armies, but they had rules, they had honor. This was something else entirely. He opened his communication device and sent a priority message to the Galactic Council. While he waited for a response, he ordered his crew to provide water and basic food to the humans. The small creature that had reached for him drank eagerly when offered a cup of clean water. The Council's response came faster than expected. The message was short and cold. Transport the biological specimens to Research Station Delta 7 for processing. Follow standard xenobiological protocols. Maintain quarantine. Zixith read the message 3 times. Then he read it again. The Council was treating these thinking, speaking creatures like laboratory animals. He thought about the small human who had asked for help. He thought about the way they had all looked at him with hope when his soldiers brought them water. Sir? Kralvex approached carefully. What are our orders? Zixith looked at his second officer. Kralvex was young but smart. He would understand the situation. The Council wants us to deliver them to a research station. For study? For processing? Zixith emphasized the last word. Both officers knew what that meant in the context of xenobiology research. Kralvex's scales shifted to a pale gray color. But sir, they can talk. They asked for help. I know. Zixith closed his communication device. I know. He walked back to the small human who had first reached out to him. The creature was sitting quietly now, but its round eyes followed his movement. When he knelt down near the cage, it spoke again. Please, the translation device said. My sister is scared. The little ones are hungry. Zixith looked around and saw what the human meant. Some of the creatures were indeed very small. They clung to the larger ones who held them protectively. These were not just random specimens, they were families. What is your name? He asked the small human. The creature tilted its head, then replied. The translator said, My name is Emma. What is your name? No research specimen had ever asked Zixith his name before. No cargo had ever introduced itself. In 30 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this situation. I am Commander Zixith, he said. Emma smiled. It was a strange expression that somehow made her face brighter. Thank you for the water, Commander Zixith. Will you help us go home? The question hung in the air of the cargo hold like a challenge. Zixith knew what his orders were. He knew what the Council expected. But looking at Emma and the other humans, he realized he was facing something that would change everything. He just did not know yet how much everything was about to change. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the communication center of Luna Base, staring at the encrypted message on her screen. She had read it 5 times, but the words still made no sense to her. 37 human children had been found in cages on an alien smuggling ship. Children taken from the colony world of New Haven 3 months ago. Ma'am, said Lieutenant Torres, her aide. We have confirmation from 3 different sources. The Krillian commander who found them sent the report through back channels. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had 2 children of her own back on Earth. The thought of them trapped in cages, scared and hungry, made her hands shake with rage. What is the official response from the Galactic Council? She asked. Torres consulted his tablet. They are processing the children as xenobiological specimens according to standard protocols. No mention of returning them to human space. Sarah opened her eyes. Specimens? Yes, ma'am. The Council's position is that the children were found in neutral space being transported for legitimate research purposes. Research purposes. Sarah repeated the word slowly. They think our children are laboratory animals. She walked to the large window that looked out over the Earth. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for less than 50 years. They were still the newcomers, still proving themselves worthy of respect. The other species saw humans as young and weak, barely able to travel between stars. But there were things about humans that the aliens did not understand, things that had kept humanity alive through ice ages and wars and disasters that should have destroyed them completely. Get me a connection to every human military commander in the sector, Sarah ordered. Ma'am, shouldn't we go through diplomatic channels first? The council expects us to negotiate. Sarah turned from the window. Lieutenant, how many children do you have? Torres looked confused. 2, ma'am. A boy and a girl. Imagine them in those cages. Imagine them crying for you and you are not there to help them. Sarah's voice was quiet but steady. Now tell me about diplomatic channels. Torres was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. I will get you those connections, Admiral. Within an hour, Sarah was looking at screens showing the faces of every human military leader within 3 sectors. Colony commanders, ship captains, base leaders, men and women who had sworn to protect human life wherever it existed. You have all seen the reports, Sarah began. 37 of our children are being held by aliens who see them as research material. The Galactic Council refuses to order their immediate return. Captain Rodriguez from the frontier world of Kepler's Edge spoke first. What are our orders, Admiral? Sarah had been thinking about this question since she read the first message. The smart thing to do was work through proper channels, file complaints with the Council, request meetings with alien ambassadors, follow the rules that kept peace in the galaxy. But Sarah kept thinking about Emma Chen Martinez, age 7, who had been visiting her grandmother on New Haven when the children disappeared. Emma loved to draw pictures of flowers and always asked too many questions. Emma, who might be sitting in a cage right now, wondering why no one had come to save her. I am taking the retribution to get our children back, Sarah said simply. The faces on the screens showed no surprise. Captain Kim from the Outer Patrol Fleet nodded. How many ships do you need? Every ship you can give me, Sarah replied. Every soldier who volunteers. Every weapon we can carry. Admiral, said Commander Walsh from Mars Station, the aliens outnumber us 1,000 to 1. Their technology is more advanced, their ships are bigger and stronger. You are right, Sarah agreed, but they made one mistake. They took our children. There was silence on all the communication channels for several seconds. Then Captain Rodriguez spoke again. The Kepler Defense Force volunteers completely. Every ship, every crew member. New Sydney Fleet stands ready, added Captain Liu. 1 by 1, every commander volunteered their forces. Not just military ships, but civilian vessels too. Merchant captains who had never fired a weapon in anger. Scientists who had never left their laboratories. Miners and farmers and engineers. The word spread through human space faster than official communications could travel. Families with missing children shared their stories. Parents looked at their own kids and imagined them trapped and afraid. The phrase, "they took our children," became a password, a battle cry, a promise of action. Sarah received a message from her own daughter on Earth. Jessica was 15 years old, too young to serve in the military. But her message was simple. Bring them home, Mom. Bring all of them home. The alien response came through official diplomatic channels. Council Speaker Vorthan, representing the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy, sent a formal statement to human leadership. The Galactic Council notes human concerns regarding the biological specimens recovered from illegal smugglers. We remind humanity that they are new members of the galactic community and must follow established procedures. The specimens will be processed according to standard xenobiological protocols. Any human military action will be considered an act of war against the established galactic order. Sarah read the message in her command center aboard the Retribution. Around her, human ships were gathering. Not just military vessels, but every ship that could carry weapons or supplies or troops. The largest human fleet ever assembled was forming in space around Earth. They still call our children specimens, she said to her senior staff. The Council doesn't understand, replied Colonel Martinez, her ground forces commander. They think we are like them. They think we will calculate the odds and choose what benefits us most. Sarah looked out at the growing fleet. Ships from every human world, carrying volunteers from every walk of life. People who had left their jobs and families to rescue children they had never met. Send a message to Council Speaker Vorthan, she ordered. What should it say, Admiral? Sarah thought about Emma Chen Martinez and 36 other children sitting in cages somewhere in alien space. She thought about every human parent who would do anything to protect their child. She thought about the difference between being smart and being right. Tell him this. We are coming to get our children. Stand aside or be moved aside. There will be no negotiation and no compromise. We are not asking for permission. The communications officer looked up from his console. Admiral, should I mention diplomatic immunity? Rules of engagement? Anything about minimizing casualties? No, Sarah said simply. Just send the message as I said it. As the message went out across the galaxy, Sarah looked at the tactical display, showing alien military positions between Earth and where the children were being held. The aliens had bigger fleets, better weapons, stronger shields. In any normal military calculation, the human fleet would be destroyed before it reached its destination. But this was not a normal military situation. This was about children who needed to come home. And Sarah had learned something in her 30 years of service that the aliens had never needed to learn. When you are fighting to protect children, you do not calculate odds. You do not measure resources. You do not consider alternatives. You simply fight with everything you have, because there is no acceptable outcome except victory. The human fleet began to move toward alien space. Behind them, more ships continued to arrive. The aliens were about to learn what happened when humanity had something worth fighting for. The first shots of the war were fired at the Nexus trading station, 3 days after Admiral Chen's fleet left Earth space. Captain Maria Santos had been delivering medical supplies when she received the emergency broadcast. All human vessels. Priority Alpha, they took our children. Maria's ship, the merchant vessel Sweet Dreams, was not built for fighting. It carried medicine and food between colony worlds. But in her cargo bay, she also carried 23 volunteer fighters and enough jury-rigged weapons to arm a small military unit. When the Nexus Station authorities tried to stop her from leaving, claiming she needed proper departure permits, Maria gave them an answer that would become legendary. My permit is written in the tears of 37 children. Get out of my way. The station's security ships moved to block her path. Maria flew straight at them. Her ship was not fast or well armed, but her crew had something the security forces did not understand. They were fighting for children who needed them. The Sweet Dreams broke through the security cordon with hull damage and failing shields. But Maria's broadcast to every ship in the system was clear. Any human vessel that can fight, follow me. Any human who can hold a weapon, join us, we have children to save. By the time Maria's ship reached the outer edge of the system, she was leading a convoy of 43 ships. Merchants, miners, passenger transports, even a few tourist vessels. None of them were warships, but all of them carried humans who had heard the call. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On the farming world of New Kansas, entire communities abandoned their crops to join rescue missions. Dr. Elizabeth Park left her research on alien diseases to serve as a combat medic. Professor Chen Wei, who had spent 20 years studying galactic law, signed up as a weapons technician. The aliens watched these preparations with confusion. High Commander Varthek of the Hegemony Defense Force reviewed intelligence reports from his flagship. They are mobilizing civilian vessels, he told his staff. Merchants, farmers, scientists, they have no military training. Perhaps they do not understand the situation, suggested his aide. Should we send another diplomatic message explaining the consequences of military action? Varthek studied the tactical displays. Human ships were moving through space in patterns that made no strategic sense. They were not concentrating their forces or securing supply lines. Instead, they seemed to be rushing toward alien territories with no regard for proper military procedure. Send a message to their Admiral Chen, he ordered. Inform her that any human military action will result in the destruction of her forces. Remind her that she is outnumbered and outgunned. The response came back within hours. It was not from Admiral Chen, but from a captain named Rodriguez. You can destroy our ships, but you cannot destroy our purpose. We are coming for our children. Nothing else matters. That message was broadcast on every human communication channel, and it became a battle cry that echoed through human space. Parents left their jobs. Students abandoned their studies. Grandparents, who had never held weapons, practiced with rifles in their backyards. The first major battle happened at the fortress world of Kthmore. The planet was supposed to be impossible to attack. It had defensive shields that could stop entire fleets. Its orbital stations carried enough firepower to destroy a dozen star systems. Admiral Chen's main force arrived at Kthmore with 400 human ships. Against them waited the Krillian Empire's 3rd Defense Fleet, 200 vessels with superior weapons, better armor, and more experienced crews. Commander Zixith, now commanding one of the defense squadrons, watched the human approach on his tactical screens. He had spent days thinking about Emma and the other children. Their faces haunted his dreams. "Sir, the humans are not following standard attack patterns," reported his weapons officer. Zixith studied the display. The human ships were coming straight, at the defensive lines. No fancy maneuvers. No attempts to find weak points in the shields. They were simply flying directly into the most heavily defended positions. "They are going to get themselves killed," muttered his second officer. The battle began when the human fleet entered weapons range. The Krillian Defense Force opened fire with everything they had. Human ships began to explode under the massive bombardment. But the surviving vessels kept coming. What happened next defied every principle of military science that Zixith had learned in his 30 years of service. When human ships were damaged beyond repair, their crews would ram them into Krillian vessels before the engines failed. When human soldiers' weapons ran out of ammunition, they used hand tools and improvised explosives. A human merchant captain named Phillips flew his damaged freighter directly into the shield generator of Defense Station Alpha. The explosion took out both his ship and the station's primary defenses. Phillips' last transmission was heard across the battlefield. For Emma and the others. For all the children. Commander Zixith watched his forces being overwhelmed by an enemy that seemed to ignore the concept of self-preservation. Human soldiers would charge through weapons fire to reach positions where they thought children might be held. Human ships would sacrifice themselves to create openings for other vessels. "They are not fighting like soldiers," observed his tactical officer. "They are fighting like parents," Zixith finished quietly. The phrase spread through the alien communication networks. Human beings were not fighting for territory or resources or political power. They were fighting with the desperate fury of parents protecting their young. The fortress world of Kthmore fell in 18 hours. Not because the humans had superior weapons or better tactics, but because they simply would not stop coming. Every time the Krillian forces thought they had won, more human ships would appear. Damaged vessels held together by emergency repairs. Civilian craft loaded with volunteers who had never been in combat before. When the planetary shields finally failed, human ground forces landed with a single mission: search every building, every facility, every possible location where children might be held. They did not stop to secure strategic positions or capture important targets. They just looked for kids who needed help. The scene that broke Commander Zixith completely was when he watched a human soldier named Jackson continue fighting even after being severely wounded. Jackson crawled through enemy fire to reach a building that might contain children. When other humans tried to help him, he waved them on. "Find the kids first," Jackson said over the radio. "Take care of me later." Jackson died before medical help could reach him. But his last words were recorded and broadcast across human space. "Tell my daughter I did this for her. Tell her Daddy loves her." By the end of the first week of fighting, 17 alien worlds had fallen to human forces. Not through superior strategy or advanced technology, but through the simple refusal to give up. Human crews fought with broken ships. Human soldiers advanced through impossible odds. Human civilians turned themselves into warriors overnight. Aliens began to understand they were facing something they had never encountered before. This was not a normal war with normal objectives and normal rules. This was what happened when an entire species decided that some things were more important than survival itself. Council Speaker Vorthon emergency session with the surviving alien military commanders. The reports they brought him painted a terrifying picture of human determination. "They do not negotiate," reported Admiral Clexton of the Hegemony Fleet. "They do not retreat when outnumbered. They do not surrender when defeated. They simply keep fighting." "What do they want?" Vorthon demanded. "Their children back," came the simple answer. "Nothing more, nothing less." Vorthon looked at the tactical displays showing human fleets advancing across the galaxy. Behind each fleet were more ships, more volunteers, more parents who had decided that 37 children were worth any sacrifice. For the first time in his 1,000-year life, the council speaker began to fear that the aliens might have made a mistake they could not fix. Marcus Webb was 16 years old and had been in the alien research facility for 3 months. He was the oldest of the 37 human children, which made him their unofficial leader. While the aliens studied them like laboratory animals, Marcus studied the aliens right back. He watched the guards. He memorized their schedules. He learned which ones were cruel and which ones seemed uncomfortable with their jobs. Most importantly, he figured out the layout of the facility and found weaknesses in their security. The younger children looked to him for comfort and protection. Emma, the 7-year-old who had first spoken to Commander Zixith, stayed close to Marcus whenever possible. She reminded him of his little sister back on New Haven. "Marcus," Emma whispered one day during their feeding time, "are our parents coming to get us?" Marcus looked at the other children watching him. They ranged in age from 5 to 15. Some had stopped asking about home. Others cried quietly at night. All of them needed hope. "Yes," he said firmly. "They are coming. I promise you that." He did not know if it was true, but he believed it had to be. Parents did not abandon their children. That was the most basic rule of being human. The children had been moved several times since their capture. Marcus tried to keep track, but the alien ships and stations all looked similar. What he did know was that their current location was some kind of research facility built into an asteroid. The gravity was low, which made moving around easier but also made him feel sick. Dr. Veltar was the head researcher in charge of studying the humans. She was a tall, insect-like being with compound eyes and clicking sounds that the translators turned into scientific language. Subject 23 shows increased leadership behavior, Dr. Veltar noted during one of her examinations of Marcus. "This confirms our hypothesis about human pack structure." "We are not a pack," Marcus replied. "We are a family." Dr. Veltar's translator buzzed for a moment before responding. "Clarification required. Genetic analysis shows you are not related to the other subjects." Marcus thought about how to explain something that seemed so obvious to him. Family is not just about genetics. We take care of each other because that is what humans do. Interesting. Dr. Veltar made notes on her electronic pad. This protective behavior extends to non-related juveniles, most unusual among intelligent species. That night, Marcus made his decision. The facility's ventilation system had access, panels that were built for alien workers, but the low gravity meant he could move through spaces that would normally be too small. He had been planning this for weeks. "I need the older kids to help me," he told the group quietly. "We are getting out of here." Sarah Kim, aged 14, shook her head. "Marcus, they will catch us, and then they will punish us worse." "Maybe," Marcus agreed, "but I have been listening to the guards talk. There is fighting going on outside. Human ships are attacking alien positions all over the galaxy." The children looked at each other with hope and fear. Emma crawled closer to Marcus. "Are our families really coming?" "Yes," Marcus said with complete certainty. "And when they get here, they are going to be very angry. We need to be ready to help ourselves." The escape plan was simple but dangerous. Marcus would crawl through the ventilation system to reach the control room. The facility's security was designed to keep people out, not to keep prisoners in. If he could access the main computer, he could unlock all the cell doors at once. "What if you get caught?" asked Tommy, a 10-year-old who had barely spoken since their capture. "Then you try again with someone else," Marcus replied. "We do not give up. Ever." That night, when the facility was running on minimal staff, Marcus began his escape attempt. The ventilation shafts were dark and cramped, but he had memorized the path. Behind him, he could hear the other children whispering encouragement. The control room was empty, except for one guard who was watching entertainment videos on his personal device. Marcus waited until the guard left for his break, then dropped down from the ceiling access panel. The alien computer systems were more complex than anything Marcus had ever seen. but the principles were similar to human technology. He looked for anything that controlled the cell doors. After 10 minutes of careful work, he found the security protocols. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made him hurry. He activated the door release just as the guard returned. The aliens' surprise shout echoed through the facility as every cell door in the detention area opened at once. "Go, go, go!" Marcus shouted over the facility's alarms. The children ran from their cells, following the escape routes he had shown them. The older kids helped the younger ones navigate the confusing corridors, but the facility was built like a maze, and the alien guards were mobilizing quickly. Marcus realized they would never make it to the escape pods before being recaptured. They needed somewhere to hide and defend themselves. "This way," he called, leading the group toward the facility's emergency shelter. It was designed to protect the staff during asteroid impacts, which meant it had thick walls and its own life support system. Commander Zixith arrived at the research facility just as the human children barricaded themselves in the emergency shelter. He had been monitoring the facility's communications and knew about the escape attempt. Part of him was impressed by the humans' ingenuity and courage. "Why are you here, Commander?" asked Dr. Veltar. "This is a research facility, not a military installation. I am here to investigate reports of mistreatment of prisoners," Zixith replied. It was not entirely true, but it gave him authority to intervene. The standoff lasted for 6 hours. The children had locked themselves in the shelter and refused to come out. Dr. Veltar wanted to use sedation gas to force them out, but Zixith overruled her. "I want to talk to their leader," he announced over the shelter's communication system. "You can talk to all of us," came Marcus's voice. "We do not have kings or rulers, we make decisions together." Zixith found this fascinating. Even in a crisis, the human children were maintaining their democratic principles. "What do you want?" "We want to go home," Marcus replied. "We want our families. We want to stop being treated like animals. The adults of your species are currently attacking multiple worlds to rescue you," Zixith said. "They are fighting against impossible odds." There was silence from the shelter for several minutes. Then Marcus spoke again, and his voice was different, harder. "Good. That is exactly what they should be doing. You are not surprised?" "Commander Zixith," Marcus said, "you have studied us for months, but you do not understand us at all. We are not just individual creatures trying to survive. We are part of something bigger. When you hurt human children, you hurt all humans everywhere. Explain this concept." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Do you have children, Commander?" "I have offspring, yes. If someone took your children and put them in cages, what would you do?" Zix thought about his 2 young ones back on the home world. I would do whatever was necessary to get them back. Now imagine that every adult of your species felt the same way about every child of your species. Not just their own offspring, but all children. That is what it means to be human." The words hit Zixith like a physical blow. He began to understand the magnitude of what the galaxy had done. They had not just taken 37 research subjects, they had attacked the future of humanity itself. "Your people will destroy themselves fighting to rescue you," he said. "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "But they will never stop trying. Because we are their future, Commander, and humans never abandon their future." Over the facility's external communications, reports were coming in of human fleets breaking through alien defensive lines. Impossible victories won through sheer determination. Civilian vessels fighting alongside military ships. Parents and grandparents and teenagers all united by a single purpose. Dr. Veltar approached Zixith nervously. "Commander, we need to move the subjects to a more secure location before the human forces arrive." Zixith looked at the research facility around him. The cages, the examination tables, the files full of notes about human behavioral patterns. For the first time, he saw it all through human eyes. This was not a research facility. This was a place where children were tortured in the name of science. "No," he said quietly. "Commander, we are not moving them anywhere." Zixith opened his communication device and began composing a message to Admiral Chen's fleet. "We are going to return them to their families, all of them, immediately. But the research project, Zixith turned to face Dr. Veltar. His scales had shifted to the deep red color of barely controlled rage. There is no research project. There are only children who want to go home. In the emergency shelter, Marcus heard the change in the aliens, voices over the communication system. Something had shifted. Someone had finally understood. "Emma," he said to the little girl beside him. "I think help is coming." The war ended not with a great battle, but with a simple message broadcast across the galaxy on all communication frequencies. It came from Commander Zixith, transmitted from the research facility where the human children had been held. "This is Commander Zixith of the Krillian Imperial Fleet to all human forces. I have 37 human children safe and ready for immediate return to their families. Please provide coordinates for transfer." Admiral Sarah Chen received the message. While her fleet was preparing to assault another alien stronghold, she had to read it 3 times before she believed it was real. "Ma'am," said her communications officer, "we are receiving confirmation from multiple sources. The alien commander is requesting safe passage to deliver the children." Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. After weeks of fighting, after losing so many ships and brave volunteers, it might actually be over. "Send him our coordinates," she ordered, "and tell him he has safe passage under my personal guarantee." The meeting took place in neutral space, with representatives from across the galaxy watching. Zixith's ship approached the human fleet slowly, broadcasting continuous messages of peaceful intent. Sarah met him in the docking bay of her flagship, surrounded by medical personnel and child psychologists who had volunteered for the rescue mission. When the alien ship's doors opened, she saw 37 human children walking out under their own power. Emma, the 7-year-old who had first spoken to Zixith months ago, ran straight to Sarah and hugged her legs. "Are you someone's mommy?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah replied, kneeling down to Emma's level. "I am. And now I am going to help get you back to your mommy too." Marcus Webb, still acting as the group's leader even in freedom, stepped forward to address Sarah formally. "Admiral Chen, we are all present and accounted for. Nobody was left behind." Sarah looked at the teenager with respect. She had read reports about how he had organized the escape attempt and kept the younger children safe. "You did good, son. Your parents are going to be very proud." Commander Zixith approached carefully. Most of the human personnel were armed and tensions were still high after weeks of warfare. But Sarah had given her word about safe passage. "Admiral Chen," he said through his translator device, I must apologize. For my species, for the Council, for all of us. We did not understand." "Understand what?" Sarah asked. Zixith looked at the children, who were being examined by human medical personnel and reunited with family members via video calls. "We did not understand that you see children differently than we do. For most species, offspring are extensions of ourselves, genetic continuations. But for humans, children are something else entirely." "They are our hope," said Marcus, speaking for his group. "They are why we build better worlds and try to be better people." The implications of this revelation spread across the galaxy faster than any military advance. The war had not been about territory or resources or political power. It had been about a fundamental difference in how species viewed their own future. Within days, alien worlds that had resisted human forces for weeks began surrendering without a fight. Not because they feared human weapons, but because they finally understood what they were fighting against. The Hegemony Council, representing 15 major alien civilizations, requested an emergency ceasefire. Their message to humanity was unprecedented in galactic history. "We surrender unconditionally and request mercy." Sarah found this almost as shocking as the original kidnapping had been. "They are surrendering to us?" "Not to our military," explained Dr. Elizabeth Park, who had become the unofficial human ambassador during the crisis. "They are surrendering to our moral authority. They have realized that a species willing to sacrifice everything for their children's welfare cannot be conquered through traditional means." The formal end of the war ceremony took place on the neutral world of Harmony Station. Representatives from every galactic civilization attended, including species that had never before acknowledged human existence. Council Speaker Vorthon, the ancient leader who had dismissed human concerns just weeks earlier, stood before the assembly to deliver a speech that would reshape galactic civilization. "We have learned," he began, "that power is not always measured in ships or weapons or technology. We have encountered a species that possesses something we had forgotten was possible: absolute moral conviction." He gestured toward the human delegation, where the rescued children sat with their families in the front row. These humans did not fight for conquest or revenge. They fought for love. And love, we have discovered, is the most dangerous force in the universe. The treaty that ended the war established the Terran Protectorate, granting humanity special status in galactic affairs. But the real change was deeper than any political agreement. Alien schools began teaching courses about human family structures and child-rearing practices. Species that had treated their offspring as property started questioning their own cultural assumptions. The concept of children as hope incarnate spread through galactic civilization like a virus. Commander Zixith became the first alien ambassador to humanity. His report to the galactic community became required reading in diplomatic schools across the galaxy. "Humans are not like us. When threatened, we calculate odds, measure resources, consider alternatives. When their children are threatened, humans become a force of nature. They do not negotiate, they do not compromise, they simply act with absolute conviction that their cause is just." The children themselves adapted to their new fame with typical human resilience. Emma became the unofficial spokesperson for the group, appearing at diplomatic functions and charming alien dignitaries with her innocent questions about their appearance and culture. Marcus Webb was offered admission to the Galactic Academy, the most prestigious educational institution in known space. His entrance essay was simple: "I learned that when humans work together to protect what they love, nothing in the universe can stop us." But the most significant change was not political or diplomatic. It was personal. Across the galaxy, alien, parents began to look at their own offspring differently. They started asking questions that had never occurred to them before. What if children were not just genetic extensions, but individuals deserving of protection and love? Sarah Chen retired from active military service 6 months after the war ended. She had been offered promotion to Supreme Admiral of all human forces, but she chose instead to return to Earth and spend time with her own children. At her retirement ceremony, she was asked to give advice to young officers who might face similar crises in the future. "Remember," she said, "that there are some things worth any sacrifice, and remember that when you are fighting for those things, you are never really outnumbered. You are fighting alongside every human who ever loved a child, and that makes you part of the strongest force in the universe." The galaxy was a different place now. Human colonies were established on worlds where children played safely under the protection of alien guards who had learned to value innocence. Interspecies families began to form as different races discovered they shared the same basic desire to nurture and protect their young. Commander Zixith, now Ambassador Zixith, kept a picture of Emma on his desk. She had drawn it for him during the prisoner exchange, showing stick figures of aliens and humans holding hands under a smiling sun. "What does it mean to you?" asked a visiting dignitary who was studying human culture. Zixith looked at the simple drawing and remembered the moment when everything had changed. "It means that some things are more important than being powerful, and it reminds me that we are all responsible for protecting hope, no matter what species it comes from." The war that began with 37 children in cages had ended with an entire galaxy learning to see through human eyes. Children were no longer just offspring or genetic material or research subjects. They were the future itself, deserving of protection and love from everyone, not just their biological parents. And humanity had taught the universe that when you threaten someone's future, you had better be prepared for the consequences.